This is the Danger Close podcast, Beyond the Books with me, Jack Carr. Welcome to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. The title drop video for my upcoming novel, Only the Dead, is out now. You can find it on my social channels at Jack Carr USA and also on my YouTube channel. My guest today is the legendary Nelson DeMille, the author of over 20 New York Times bestselling novels to include The Charm School, Plum Island, Nightfall, Wildfire. Amazing. He dropped out of college in 1966 to join the United States Army, where he served as an infantry officer with the First Cavalry Division, spent a year in Vietnam, then came home and started writing. His latest novel is on shelves now. It is called The Maze. Now, without further ado, Nelson DeMille. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
So we're here. Alrighty.
We are here. And
I like your office. I like your office better than mine.
Thank you. Not a bad spot. It's a little bit separated from the house. We have 3 kids, so I need a place to escape that is physically separated, even though it's just by a few yards, as I sit down to write the novels. Which is something I wanted to ask you about. The Maze comes out tomorrow. So by the time people hear this, it'll be out on shelves everywhere.
Right.
How did you do it all those years? Did you have a special room that no one would disturb you in? Did you go someplace else to write? How did you do it during the 70s, 80s, 90s, and today? How did that look?
Yeah, and because you're a writer too, so you need a separate space. I have an area I call Area 51, and no one's allowed in there. And I don't have a phone, except I have my cell phone, but there's nothing in there. It's just a table, and I write longhand. So I have #1 pencils, electric pencil sharpener, and a coffee pot, and legal pads, and I'm in good shape. And it's out of the house, though. I mean, I need to be out of the house. I need to be get up in the morning, shower, like everybody else, get dressed, go to work. In another room in the same building, I have my assistant. So, but we're separated by one staircase and a couple of yards down the hall, and it works. It's been working for me. Gosh, 44 years now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've noticed that too. I have one computer that I just write on that doesn't do anything else. It's just for writing. And then phone has to be in a separate room. I can't just turn it off and have it near me. I put that in a separate room as well, which I find is very helpful. But the #1 pencil, where did that come from? Why not a #2 pencil? I think #1 is a little softer. Is that right? They get harder as they go up.
Right, exactly. #1 is the softest, and it. If you're writing 5,000 words a day longhand, it starts to drag after a couple of hours when you have a #2 or #3 you can barely read. And, by trial and error over the years, I figured it's #1 pencil. And it's also the legal pads, and not the pulpy, crappy kind you get when you're in high school or college. These are the sheen ones. You got a nice hard sheen on it. And I have my coffee cup next to me, and, everything's got to be just where it is. Everybody says, can you write on the road? No, I barely can write in my own office, but everything in there is, structured for me to be productive for the day.
Wow, that is amazing. But longhand, 5,000 words a day?
Wow. Some days, no, not every day. And as you know, we get good days, we get bad days. And sometimes when I'm on a roll, I will write until dawn. I've seen the sun come up a couple of times.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you've got the same experience. When you want to roll, you want to roll. If you're getting writer's block, there's no such thing as far as I'm concerned.
No.
You sit there until, writer's block is an excuse to get up and go play golf. No. You sit there because this is your job, and eventually it'll come. And if you're having a difficult, morning, have another cup of coffee, or go read the stuff you've already written, and that kind of impels you into the next chapter. So
exactly.
I tend to write, 7 to 10 hours a day, but there have been days I've written, say, till dawn.
Yep. I find those days are getting harder and harder to do as I get older. For my
Right.
first couple books, I had a couple all-nighters, no problem. The last one, I had an all-nighter, and it floored me the next day. It was a,
Right. Right.
a lot more difficult to deal with than in years past. But on writer's block, I took some advice from Stephen Pressfield as I was starting down this path, and I heard him say something like, "You've never heard of a dentist getting dentist block or a truck driver getting truck driver block. You're a professional. You sit down, you write. That's what you do." And
Right.
that was very, very liberating.
If you can't do it, if you're getting writer's block, you should look for something else to do.
Exactly.
And Bill, you probably know that the the writing that's done late at night, sometimes it is good, but most of the times when you read it the next day, it's not as good as you thought it was at 3 in the morning. I mean, you thought you were being brilliant because you were flying high on coffee, and then you read it and you say, "Well, at least you got something down, right?"
Exactly.
So that's the thing.
Yeah, something to edit. But I would ask you about the start your path into writing and your path into the U.S. military. You did 3 years of college and then went into the military. Really at the high point of the Vietnam War. I think you went in 1966. What compelled you to leave college? Because I think you could have stayed another year. You didn't have to join the military, I don't think. But in 1966, with 3 years of college under your belt, you picked up and joined the military, became an officer, and went to Vietnam.
Yeah, I had another year on my student exemption, whatever they called it then. I was bored. And I didn't go back for the winter semester, which was January of '66. And by April, I just went down to the draft board and just to chat, to see if they wanted me, and they did want me. And when you enlisted in those days, as opposed to being drafted, you could pick certain things. And I wanted officer candidate school, I wanted language school, I wanted certain things. They gave you a contract. An Army contract is worth nothing, by the way.
I'm aware.
I did sign a contract, and I did get the officer candidate school, and then I went to jungle training school, and then I went to Vietnam for a year. Came back, had about 6 months to go, and finished out in April of '69. And a lot of men who come back from war, you think, and especially educated men, I guess, like a Norman Mailer, you want to write about what you've experienced, and that's kind of what got me into the writing process.
No kidding. And when you were downrange in Vietnam, where was the jungle training, by the way? Where did you go to do jungle training before you deployed?
Fort Gulick Canal Zone.
Oh,
it was almost a 4-week course, and it was mostly escape and evasion, jungle training. When I sent me to jungle training school, I figured, typical Army, they're probably going to send me to Alaska
exactly.
next. But no, they actually remembered that I had jungle training, and I got my orders for Southeast Asia. They never said Vietnam. It always said on your orders Southeast Asia area of operations.
Okay.
Which meant Vietnam, but they didn't want to use the V word.
Oh, interesting. Did they send you to language school? Did you get that, or did they forget that part of the contract?
They forgot about that, and but that would have been a good one, and I could have gotten that if I'd stayed in. Mm-hmm. But I had my 3 years in, and I did want to get back to college. And I went back. I finished up, and the war was still going on. And I actually had a thought about now going back in again, but that didn't happen. Had to do with a woman, as it always does. And right, so and I started writing. He said this was '69. I started actually writing in '73. And I was writing a Vietnam War novel, the Great American War novel that nobody wanted to publish, but it did get me into the process. So, and eventually I did write about Vietnam with Word of Honor and Upcountry. I had 2 Vietnam books out of my 23. Because I didn't want to be the Vietnam writer. I didn't want to be Phil Caputo or Tim O'Brien. I just wanted to get it out of my system. And if there was more need for it, or more publishers or editors wanted it, I would have done another. But I think I said what I had to say in those 2 books.
Did you ever what happened to that Great American War novel that you were working on in the early years? Is it in a drawer somewhere, or do you visit parts of it, or what happened to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I did visit parts of it. That's what you do. I kind of mined that because it was written kind of fresh. And later, when I wrote Word of Honor, I used some of that. And then when I wrote Upcountry, I used a little bit of it there. So, but could I do another one? I went back in '97 with two other guys who had served, and one was a combat medic and one was a Marine. And we went back in '97, so it was 30 years after we had, pretty much 30 years after we'd all left. One of them was a childhood friend, and so I knew him when he was in Vietnam. The other one was a recent friend. But we said, look, we really need to get back to this place, and I want to, that's what I wrote Word of Honor. Not Word of Honor, I'm sorry, I wrote Upcountry. And it was a good experience. It was more positive than negative. There were some bad memories, but it was also cathartic, and it was good to see the country at peace and to see the people, and and from that 1 month visit came Upcountry, which one of my better books as far as I'm concerned.
Interesting. Wow. So I went back to Pearl Harbor this last year for the commemoration events. My daughter was 16 then, and we helped escort 63 World War II veterans back for those events for about a week. Then we went to Normandy, did the same thing. We took 23 veterans, went back for the D-Day commemoration events, which was incredible, with an organization called the Best Defense Foundation. And now they're going to start taking Vietnam veterans back to Vietnam. So I'll be volunteering on some of those in the years ahead.
Right.
I've seen you post a couple pictures of you back in Vietnam on your Instagram. So I've seen a couple of those photos. But after you got back, and up until you went back in '97, what were some of your, I guess, did you revisit the memories of that time frequently, or not? Was it just a foundation upon which to build, or what were your thoughts over those years between 1969 and 1997?
Good question. I mean, I was thinking about it less and less, but as my children got older, they wanted to go to Vietnam with me. I still had a lot of friends, veterans, and we'd, talk about it. And, but, I didn't have anything near post-traumatic stress. And I know some people did, and I honor that. But the thing was, you came back like every other, like millions of men in World War II. Like my father, who served in the Navy, came back, got a job, got married, raised a family, and that was the end of it. And that, I think I was influenced by that generation, because I saw all my uncles, my mother's brothers, and my father and his family. They all went, and almost all of them went, because it was a real universal draft. Yeah. My father was actually Canadian. He was here, but he got scooped up into the American Navy. And when he got on with his life, and when these guys got around, they sat around a table playing cards. I remember as a kid, drinking cheap, bad rye whiskey and smoking cigarettes. The war never came up. And some of them had some amazing experiences, I'm sure, but it never came up. And I think that's what the citizens, soldiers should do. You go, you serve your country, you come back. I think for us, the coming home was not good. It was very unpleasant. I was hassled at the airport coming into San Francisco from Vietnam after serving for a year in a combat zone. Now I'm getting hassled by civilians. I need this. And I had a war trophy, a legitimate war trophy, a Russian rifle.
Oh, wow.
And it had papers to it, but they, I was stopped about 6 times because of this rifle. I guess I don't blame them for stopping me in the airport with a rifle, but I had the papers, and one guy wanted to take it away. And I said, over my dead body, you're getting this. And I learned this the hard way. So it was unpleasant. And I had a girlfriend prior to that, and she gave a call. Yeah, but it was not so much emotional. It was stressful. It was a stressful coming home. There was no parades, and I had a 30-day leave, and I tried to connect with some of my college buddies, but they either weren't around or weren't interested in high school friends. So it was strange, and that's been written about too. And I kind of wanted to write about that, but I said, let me leave that one alone. That was almost a worse memory than what happened in Vietnam.
Did you still have that rifle?
Yeah, I do.
No kidding. Amazing.
It's an
Amazing.
SK-44 bolt action.
Wow.
Not an automatic rifle because
No kidding.
they don't like you to bring automatic
No,
rifles.
no, you don't want to mess with those. I don't know if you can see it on the what camera angle you have, but I have a an Enfield 1864 that's above the
Okay.
screen right here that I brought back from
Yeah.
Afghanistan. You could bring back with paperwork anything. I think it was
Right.
1899 or maybe 1900, but anything before that you could bring back with just a simple signature. Anything else got a little more complicated or was just a no go. But got that Lee Enfield. It's a percussion, or not a Lee Enfield, just an Enfield. It's a percussion rifle up there, and I was there early enough before they started making the fakes. So they make these fake ones in Pakistan to sell to the Americans to try to pass off as legitimate 1860s Enfields. But I was in early enough where I got that one right there. Do you remember your first day in Vietnam when you landed? Did you land at an airfield and step off? And what was that like to land there for the first time?
No, it was October, and I got out of an air-conditioned plane. We were flown over. I happened to take a Braniff. I mean, it was a chartered flight. We were all full of soldiers.
Okay.
And I remember, stepping off the plane. It was about maybe 6 a.m. Sun was just coming up, but I remember stepping out into this 85-degree heat at Tan Son Nhut Airport in Vietnam, and it had just been 66 degrees in the plane or whatever. And I said, this is going to be a long year. This is going to be a long year. Then from there, we went to Long Binh. We got processed, and then I got my orders to go up country. I got my orders for the First Cavalry Division, and somebody flew me up there in a helicopter, and I was a platoon leader. So I was going to take over a platoon. I didn't, I was. I was more anxious about that, about being, a platoon leader and having these men entrusted to me, than I really was about the combat per se. And when I got out to the field, I got to the forward position. My company was out in the field, and they were actually engaged. So they were being shot at, and I could hear it on the radio. And I said, "Oh boy, this is going to be a long year." Or so, but like anything else, give it 30 days, and you're okay.
Wow. Did you have some senior enlisted guys who'd been there for a while to help?
Sure.
My gosh.
You got to make friends with the sergeants right away.
Yeah.
They can make or break you. They see a young lieutenant coming in, and it's like fresh meat to them. They're going to test you right away and see what you're made out of.
Okay.
But by my 10th or 11th month, I was the seasoned guy. I was the guy people came to, so that felt good too.
Wow. What would you remember? What your official mission was up there? Did they have was it clear cut, or what was it? What was it like?
Oh, it was just search and destroy almost every day. I mean, it was just we were out, and I started off a place called Bang Son, but then we went up country to the I Corps, which is by the DMZ, by North Vietnam, where Khe Sanh was and Hue, and that's where a lot of the action was. They moved the cavalry up there, partly to help break the siege at Khe Sanh. The Marines were in the siege, and it was a search and destroy. It was that kind of war. It was a guerrilla war, and they looked for us, we looked for them, and sometimes we found each other, and that's what it was every day. A lot of booby traps and a lot of uncomfortable situations with sometimes the villages. Sometimes the villages would be friendly, sometimes they weren't. And disease is always disease in these third world countries, as you know. Anything from trench foot to mosquitoes and malaria, and you name it. And leprosy. There was a lot of leprosy in Vietnam for some reason. And at Khe Sanh, the bubonic plague had actually broken out amongst the North Vietnamese because of all the dead bodies and the dead water buffalo and the trench rats. And so, we're not to tell war stories, but when COVID came around, I'm saying, like, I mean, I've been through the bubonic plague and leprosy and everything else. Not that I wasn't, I wasn't concerned. Of course, I was concerned, but I put it in front of them. I didn't get sick over there. I spent 12 months wanting to get maybe a little bit of a cold to get back to the rear for a couple of days, but I was, a healthy young man, and I didn't get so much as a sniffle for 12 months in the worst of sanitary conditions with the leeches and the swamps and the rice paddies full of feces,
Wow.
and you're covered with this stuff all the time. But by that time, I think you built up your immune system.
Wow. Jeez. During that year, did you ever think of things strategically? Did you ever question, what are we doing here? Or this is not working? Or were you just focused on the tactical level, taking your guys out, conducting the mission, getting everybody back as safe as you can? Or did you think of both? Did you think of the strategic stuff privately, or how did that affect what you did on the ground?
Yeah, a really good question. Nobody's ever asked me before, actually. And and it was privately. I had private thoughts about this, and I would sometimes talk to other officers about, what are we doing here? But it was a private conversation. Um, Mostly I was just, day to day, really concerned about the guys, concerned about, engagements. Um, but coming home, we didn't get a lot of news there. So even when the Tet Offensive happened, and I was there during the Tet Offensive, we didn't think it was as big a deal as it turned out to be. I mean, we knew something big was happening, but it's amazing that when you cut off from news sources and all you get is the Army rumor mill, we knew that this was something serious was happening. It took about a week or so. I mean, people back in the States, I think, knew in day one, day two, that this was a massive countrywide offensive. I was up in I Corps near City of Wei, and all I knew is that the North Vietnamese had taken the city away, and so we had on the ground concerns, and the bigger picture wasn't really clear to me till I got back from Vietnam and was able to read about it. So that was interesting, to be really in the middle of an historical event like the Tet Offensive and not know you're in the middle of an historic event.
Wow, amazing. And then when you got back, what lessons do you think, whether they were immediate or years down the line, that you look back on as lessons that you took and then applied either to your life personally or professionally from that time in country?
Well, I mean, personally, it's and I think everybody in Vietnam, anybody's been any war, whether it be Afghanistan, Iraq, the first lesson is don't sweat the small stuff, all the stuff that was a big deal to you. And I was 3 years at college, and many times I said to myself, I don't think I made a good move here, but but I was so anxious to get back to school, and but I was happy to serve. But I put things in perspective. The things that bothered me, no matter how small and petty they were, pre-Vietnam, didn't bother me anymore. I came back, and I was, we talked about post-traumatic stress briefly. I was a happy guy. I had survived the war. I'd been shot at for, a year, and I felt good about me, and I felt good about what I did. And I felt good that I, served these guys, and I was a good officer, and I'm still in touch with many of them. And just had a reunion about 7 or 8 years ago in Fort Myers, Florida, and they presented me with a cavalry sword that they had made up for me with my name on it and that type of thing. And I was moving because you think you did the best job you could, but you're not sure. Yeah. But when these guys came there for me at this restaurant and presented me with the sword, it was really an emotional moment for me.
I bet that's how you did a good job. If those junior enlisted guys have respect for you, stay in touch with you,
Right.
That's really telling. And it sounds like we had fairly similar experiences, as much as you can have between all those years. In that I sleep very well at night. That I did the best I could downrange. I feel good about what I did downrange. Things went our way for whatever reason, whether it was luck or skill or a combination.
Right.
I feel very good about that. And then I apply certain parts of that to my writing. And then you got home, and it took a couple of years, but then you started writing before The Rivers of Babylon hit. There were a couple series that you did first.
Yeah.
Do you look at those as kind of like your training ground, or what were those? What was those years like before The Rivers of Babylon hit in 1978?
Back in those days, a lot of writers did paperback originals. There was a lot of paperback original pulpers, we call them. I think they cost about $1.25 to buy, and that was my training. That was my on-the-job training, and I couldn't to get published in hardcover was a dream. I did a few police series because it was the time in the 70s when there was a lot of crime, and of course we have it again, but at that time it was, cities were not safe, and you had vigilante heroes in literature and in movies, and you had Batman and Robin and Serpico, that type of thing. So the publisher said, "Why don't you forget Vietnam for a minute here? Why don't we try some of these police procedurals?" And I remember he gave me a whole bunch of paperback pulpers, and he said, "Read these." And because he had read my Vietnam stuff, he says, "It's good, but I can't publish it. But I know you know how to write, so transfer that, to the mean streets of New York City," which I did. My first book was called The Sniper.
I know. I love that title.
Yeah. I don't recommend any of these books, by the way.
I know this, they're not on your website, but I love the covers of those types of books from back in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
The pulp covers, I collect them. I love those covers. There's just something about that artwork it was so different. You can pick one out, exact time period when they were created, and I love those right there. So how did the Rivers of Babylon then come about after you're writing the Joe Riker series and you're writing these other books and some short fiction in there, and then By the Rivers of Babylon comes out, and now you have your hardcover.
Right, and some of my writing had come to the attention of other people. Well, a man named Bernie Geis, who was kind of a legend. He had published Valley of the Dolls and William Peter Blatty before The Exorcist. He also published President Truman, autobiography. And he was a well-respected man. And he came to me and said, "I have this great idea for a book. And I think you're the guy to do it because you have the military background," because it was an Arab-Israeli thriller and it had a lot of gunplay in it. And I don't think there were that many writers around who knew one end of a rifle from another, and probably not today either. But he liked the writing, and he liked the fact that I had this kind of background. He said, "You could do By the Rivers of Babylon." It was actually his idea. And so I said, "Okay, I like to write my own books." But then he named the number, and I said, "Yes, I'll write that." So that's how I got started. And it was a hardcover, and it was a Book of the Month Club main selection. And I Reader's Digest condensed, and we sold a lot of foreign language rights. And so I went from, I think they were paying me, Jack, about I think it was like $1,800 a book, and I went from that to six figures. And in 1978, which was a lot of money then. It's a lot of money now.
Yeah,
actually.
It sure is.
It totally changed my life. And,
oh my gosh!
And that was 23 books ago.
Wow. Incredible. Do you remember if he talked about it, or if you did research into the 1970 Dawson Field hijackings, when those, I forget exactly how many planes right now, but 3 of them went to this place, Dawson Field in Jordan, and one of them blew up, and very spectacular type of a terrorist event. Everyone was got off before it exploded. But did that influence any part of By the Rivers of Babylon?
Yeah, and when was that? Do you know the year?
That was 1970.
So, wow. No, I mean, I barely remember it, but I think, I'm not sure when the Entebbe raid was. That was also, but what was in the news then was the beginnings of the Arab-Israeli conflict. I mean, it had been going on for 2,000 years, we know that, but it was starting to make the news. And Black Sunday by Thomas Harris had come out before Babylon. It was like one of the first, if not the first, big Arab-Israeli terrorist kind of book. And all of a sudden, Islamic terrorism was in the news, but it was also getting into literature. So I think, this guy Bernie Geis kind of, he had his finger on the pulse. I wasn't that interested in the subject, but actually when I started researching it, I became interested.
When they gave you that number, you became very interested. That's fantastic. And then you do 1979 Mayday, which becomes a movie in 2005. Cathedral, Talbot Odyssey, and then Word of Honor, which later became 2003 film with Don Johnson and Jean Triplehorn, who was just in my book, The Terminal List. She plays a character in the Terminal List, which came out on Amazon Prime this year, and Charm School, which is where I discovered you. And then I went back and I read everything else. This is my original copy right here of the Charm School. You can tell it's been with me for quite some time. I would share all these different books, yours in particular, with my grandmother. She wrote my name in here, so it's in her handwriting right inside. So this is something I treasure to this day. And it was one of those books that cemented me on my path into writing. This book is such a powerful book, especially for me at that time. I read it in 1989, so probably a year after it came out. But amazing. And of course, at the time, I wish I thought this is a perfect movie. Why aren't they making this a movie? It's absolutely fantastic. And then I went back and I think I read next the Talbot Odyssey, and I still have my original. We moved recently, so I have boxes everywhere. But I still have my original of that as well. Fantastic. Read everything that you've written ever since. So I am a huge fan. But it cemented me on my path because I knew I wanted to be a SEAL, and I knew I wanted to write afterward. And then books like this that had protagonists with backgrounds similar to ones that I wanted to have in real life in the military or intelligence circles, that sort of a thing. So it was extremely impactful. And when you wrote Charm School, did you know, were there any tipping points along the way or points that kind of accelerated you on to the next stage of your in the profession of writing, or any that stand out to you during the other than your first one, obviously, but maybe during the 80s, or were you just nose to the grindstone, churning these out and doing the best you could and improving along the way? What when you look back at the 80s, what do you think about?
Yeah, well, that's a good question too. When I trained in Panama, it was Army Jungle Training School, but we did train with a lot of SEALs. I just wanted to say, you guys, even way back in the dark ages when nobody knew what SEALs were, back in '67, this was, the Army guys were impressed. These SEALs had come to us already kind of trained, and we're training jungle school for the first time, but the SEALs they kind of stayed together, didn't talk to the Army guys, but they were an amazing bunch. And I said, I hope I remember the old frogmen from World War II. Might have been the predecessor of the SEALs. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought, maybe I should be a Navy SEAL instead of being an Army infantry officer. But to answer the question, every book, I did mostly standalones before I did this Corey series. Yep. And different subjects. Then when the Cold War came, the Cold War was always there. And I was a fanatic Cold War reader. I read everything about the country. I was starting with Le Carré, Spy Who Came Up from the Cold, '63, and then all through college. And I read, like everybody in college, I read all the James Bond movies. Some of them were Cold War.
Yeah.
And I was kind of happy being the Cold. I didn't want to be the Vietnam writer, but I didn't mind being the Cold War writer. And then Charm School, which you mentioned, I went to Moscow in '87. I think the book came out in '88. And '89, the wall came down, the Cold War was over, and I was out of a job.
Got to adapt.
Right. And and I wasn't the only one. There's a lot of people who are making a living doing either straight Cold War or something to do with the Cold War. And all of a sudden we had to switch gears. It's like World War II being over. But the funny thing is, in World War II, books went on and on and on to this day, 75 years later, and movies. But when the Cold War ended, if you noticed, that was about the end of the Cold War books. And you don't see them anymore. We don't even see the retrospective of, how it was then as a nostalgia trip to the 70s or 80s. Then I had to kind of scramble around for something. And I think the next book after that might have been
Gold Coast.
Thank you.
Well, once you have so many, I understand. I only have 5 right now. I'm working on 6, and I still have to which one was that? What color eyes do they have? When did that one come out? So I have to think about it for a second. But Charm School. I mean, absolutely incredible. What was where did all the ideas come from when you sat down to do this book? Was it one of those ones that did you outline, or did you come up with an initial idea, Cold War, some spy? But this really changed. This was really one of those ones. It wasn't just a Cold War novel. I mean, this has things in it that have never been written about before. Right. It was ingenious, and it was also something that people realized could actually and probably I gave a nod to this in my last novel. It's subtle, but it's in there. And in my first novel, I give a nod to Plum Island in that one. So there's just a sentence, but I always like to tip my hat to those who inspired me along the way. So they're in there for fans of yours that might read mine. They'll notice. how did Charm School come about?
It's if anybody's seen The Americans on TV, the series, it's about Russians who come to America but are trained to be Americans and to infiltrate society. And Okay, so in I think it was April or May of 1968, when I was in Vietnam, I was going through. I was on a mission someplace. I mean, an administrative mission. I stopped at Wei Fu Bai Air Base, and there was an officers' club there that was air conditioned and had cold beer. I mean,
Hey,
so you got to stop there. And I was sat at the bar. Remember, it was the first air conditioning I'd probably experienced in 5 6 months, and a cold beer. And there was a lot of Air Force guys. There was an Air Force O Club, and they some of them were fighter pilots, and they were, they were fascinated by what I did. They were saying, "Oh my God, you're out in the jungle, people are shooting at you," and I said, "Hey, it's nothing compared to what you guys do. I mean, dodging, missiles, and I mean, I can't even imagine flying out of Fort Phantom over enemy territory. I'd rather have my feet on the ground." But anyway, long story short. They were talking about guys who got shot down, was seen bailing out, and they were seen by Americans, and rescue missions had gone up, but they disappeared. They didn't appear on any POW lists.
Mm-hmm.
So then somebody there said, "Well, they're going to Russia. They're being kidnapped. That the North Vietnamese are getting these Russian surface-to-air missiles from the Russians, and in exchange, they're giving the Russians the product of those missiles, which is these American fighter pilots."
Mm-hmm.
And why do the Russians want them? They want to learn American tactics and how American fighter pilots are trained, why American fighter pilots are better than their pilots in many ways. That was the theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I always remembered that. I said, all these guys. And then after the war, there was still all these MIAs. There were like 2,000 MIAs, and a lot of them had been seen alive but disappeared and never appeared on POW lists, and they weren't released when the prisoners were all released after the war, American prisoners. So I took it a step further in saying that after they were debriefed as fighter pilots, the Russians decided to start this school called the Charm School
Mm-hmm.
to train the KGB agents to speak like Americans, act like Americans, think like Americans, and go to America and infiltrate American society. And then I think the people who made the series, The Americans, totally ripped off my idea.
There are a lot of similarities, that's for sure. I noticed that as well.
And the book did incredibly well. I mean, really incredibly well. I was, the height of it was kind of, Cold War was sort of winding down. I wouldn't say height of, but it did very well. And then by the time the paperback came out, I think the war was about to come down at about the same time. But the book still sells well. People read it now as a retrospective, and it's one of the, I think one of my better books, and it's actually used in some college courses as a adjunct to some Cold War nonfiction. So that's good.
Oh yeah. Oh no, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, back then. Of course, there's no internet, so I can't find out when your next novel's coming out. The best I can do is go and ask at the local bookstore, and they wouldn't really know either. It was just kind of unless you're kind of closer to a publication date. Because it was before the years, you didn't have a recurring character, so it wasn't one of those things where you're going to get every year. It was maybe it was every year, maybe it was every 2 years, maybe it was every 2.5 in there. But I was always waiting for the next one. And then The General's Daughter, of course, 1992 becomes a 1999 film with John Travolta. I mean, what an amazing novel that is. Then Spencerville, another one of my favorites. After that, then Plum Island, that introduces us to the character that is the protagonist of The Maze, which will be out when people hear this. And for John Corey, what made you want to write him? And then did you know he was going to be a recurring character from that first outing in Plum Island?
No, because I had only written standalones before then, and I just wanted it was the beginning of the politically correct movement, if you could call it a movement, and I wanted to write a character who said things that were not politically correct. And it was kind of funny back then. And he's meant to be one-shot character, and he's a little bit of a misogynist, but the women still love him anyway. And he makes jokes that maybe today would not be as accepted. And we kind of, and the book did well. It was like, and you would appreciate this, it was like 17 weeks on the New York Times list.
Oh my gosh.
Which is a long, that was the longest I've had a book on the list.
Wow.
But I moved on to another book. You probably know better than me because you have a list.
I sure do, right here. Plum Islands to Lion Game, then to Upcountry.
Right. And then, well, I didn't really want to write it, but my editor and my agent said, can you write a sequel to the John Corey book, to Plum Island? And I kind of resisted it, but I saw the fan mail coming in. The fan mail was incredible. And, eventually somewhere along the line, I noticed the royalty statement that looked good too. But I also knew it was on the list for 16 weeks.
Yeah.
But I didn't really want to write a series, and they're difficult. People think they're easy because you've already created the character, but this character has now got a background that you have to kind of introduce into the second book and the third, and you can only carry so much forward before it just becomes, a regurgitation of the past. And the character has to be consistent. The internal chronology of the Corey books is over 20 years, but the external chronology, the real chronology, the internal chronology is like maybe a 4-year period. So the character can't really age much. And I'm aging, and I'm getting maybe a little different in my speech patterns. So, but you want to make that character the same. So those are the challenges of an ongoing series. And this is number 8, and maybe the last. I'm not sure. I don't want to go, a bridge too far on this, because I think this is going to be a good book, and I think it's good to end it on a high note. But we'll see. I can be convinced that I need another John Corey.
Yeah, you can be convinced when those royalty statements arrive. And I'll pick up mine tomorrow when it hits shelves. So I can't wait to read it. And if for anyone listening, 1 week on the New York Times bestseller list is incredible. 2 weeks, 3 weeks is amazing. And you get 16 weeks on. I mean, that is just next level. And you do Nightfall then in 2004. And I read Nightfall on a plane. So I recommend people read this, but not on a plane. I distinctly remember talking about acts of God and the insurance side of airline safety and all that in here. But this was genius, especially the way you end it. I took notes on this, and people who have read my stuff will now know that there was some inspiration to my novels, my fourth novel, The Devil's Hand, from Nightfall, right here. But I read this actually at language school. They did send me to language school in the military.
Really?
They sent me for French. They thought I was going to go to North Africa, West Africa to do some things, and I did, but they gave me an interpreter the whole time. So now my French is mixed with my Spanish, and now it's all that's just how it goes. But that's where I read this, so I have a distinct memory of reading this, and what a fantastic, amazing, of course, John Corey in this one as well. Same thing with Wildfire. Then you have The Gatehouse, where you revisit some characters from the Gold Coast.
Right. Yeah. The Gold Coast was another one of those books that were kind of a surprise hit, because it was really more literary than it was action adventure. And I got some editorial pushback. They didn't know if they wanted this book. And the Gold Coast, the best way to describe it is The Great Gatsby meets The Godfather on the Gold Coast of Long Island, the old area of mansions and estates, and a mafia family moves in next to an old waspy blue blood family. So right away, you've got a setup that's kind of fun. But they said, this is not you. You write more muscular books, and this is like a book of manners and mores. And I said, yeah, but I live here. I live in this area. I know these people. Let me do this. It became a huge bestseller, and so many people wanted a sequel, but I wanted to leave it alone. I had never done a sequel. I mean, the series is different, as you know, from a sequel. A sequel is really picking up the same story and moving it forward. But I got finally talked into it after 20 years. So I did a sequel to, which was The Gatehouse. And it was good. I mean, I'm not saying don't buy my book, but do buy The Gold Coast. And if you're really into the characters, and The Gatehouse is a good sequel. But sequels are always tricky, whether they be movies or books. I mean, the only sequel I can remember that was actually as good as, if not better than, was the movie Godfather 2.
I was guessing you were going to say that. Yeah.
Right. There's not much else. You're going to name it. You're going to count them on one hand.
Right.
How many sequels are as good as or better than the original? So it's always tricky. It's always got a lot of traps there that all writers fall into. But that taught me my lesson. No more sequels.
No more sequels, except for, well, we have The Lion, Panther, The Quest, Radiant Angel, Cuban Affair, and then you do The Deserter with your son. What was how was that? Because I knew you had an experience with Mayday that you weren't had vowed never to do another book like that, and then you do one with your son.
Yeah, Mayday was an airline disaster novel. I did this with a childhood friend, Tom Block, who's my co-author on Mayday, and he was a U.S. Air captain and a magazine writer, and we decided we needed to do this book together, Mayday. It was a great idea, a great plot, and I didn't have all the technical. I didn't really want to research it, but I think he was a writer. So, long story short, we did it together. But these are two clashing egos, huge egos clashing. Airline pilot, ex-infantry officer,
Yeah.
best-selling author, and he was a well-known magazine writer. And we had been friends since I think we were 4 years old. But
Wow.
I don't think we spoke for about a year after the book was finished. And yet, for all that dissension with in the writing process, it became a very, very successful book, and it was made into a CBS TV movie of the week. So it was successful critically and commercially. But I never wanted to do it again. I used to have a little sign from the French Resistance on my desk that said "Collaborators will be shot." And,
That's fantastic.
I said never again, never again. But then Simon & Schuster, my publisher, when they wanted to sign me to a 3-book deal, said, "Can you do 3 co-authored books?" And I said no. And then they named a number, and this is the problem when they named a number. And I said, okay, well, I'll try it. I don't want to be totally obligated to it. But, and I did sort of a contest. My agents and my publisher found 7 or 8 authors who were writing blind, on the same subject and what the book was going to be about. And we picked one blind, and it was a good writer. We just, again, the same thing. We couldn't get along, and he had a different vision. And so I said, well, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do any of these co-authored books. But I started thinking about it, and I realized my son is a screenwriter.
Mm-hmm.
He got his MFA at UCLA, and one of his films was first place at Comic-Con, a short. And I said, he knows he doesn't do novels, but he knows how to write. And maybe if we can get him writing and making some money, he can pay me back the tuition from Yale or something. So I called him one night, and I said, I said, Alex, you want to do this? And it was a flat, outright no. He said, no, I'm not working with you. I'm not writing novels. And then, this is true, though. I named the number, and then there was a pause on the phone, and he said, well, let's talk. And it worked out. It worked out really well because he wrote the first draft of every chapter, and I just kind of became the editor of the draft, and gave it back to him, and he did some work, gave it back to me. So I didn't help him create either the characters or the storyline or the ambiance of the setting. Most of the Deserter was set in Venezuela. He did all that research. He did really most of the work. And I just became like super editor, and I did some, a little rewriting where it needed it. But that process worked for that book. And now we're on a second book called Bloodlines, which will be out next year. And it's the same 2 characters of Jack, Brody and Taylor, the male, female, and they are Army Criminal Investigation Division detectives, and they're investigating crimes all over the world that have to do with the Army or on Army bases or federal property, that type of thing. So there's a lot of room there to have these characters continue into the future and wherever there's an American military installation.
Oh, that's fantastic. Maybe Alex can finally pay you back for Yale after this next one. We'll see. We'll see. And Hollywood, I remember reading, it was a long time ago, about the John Corey series. And I think I read that Sylvester Stallone was interested at one point. And I thought, and this was maybe 10 years ago, and I might be off by a few years there, but I remember thinking, oh, that would be good. Maybe it was even in early 2000s, 2005. It's possible. I can't remember exactly, but I thought that might have been a good vehicle for him at that time, 20 20 years ago. What has been the Hollywood interest in the John Corey series?
Good question. The other one I was interested was Bruce Willis. He actually called me in my office once, not my cell phone, my office. I don't know how I got the number, but first I didn't think it was him. My secretary said, Bruce Willis is on the phone for you. I said, right. He said, whatever he's selling, I don't want. It really was Bruce Willis. And he says, people are telling me that I'm John Corey, whoever the hell John Corey is. But he was like a John Corey character. Yeah. Consciously, I didn't really base the Corey character, but it's that kind of snide, sarcastic, and irreverent type of personality. And so he was interested, and Stallone was interested, and a few other people. The property was owned by Columbia Motion Pictures, and it was owned by the Bregman production company, who did a lot of the Pacino films. And then it's been around. I mean, it's been around now. Now it's with Sony TV, and we all see all these characters on these series on TV, and with these characters. And I don't know if you're working on a deal, but there's a lot out there now. So.
Oh yeah, it's a good time. I think for authors. I've realized they've closed some of the loopholes for authors. Like I think David Morrell, he kept some of the merchandising rights for First Blood back in 1972 when someone said, he said, why would I want merchandising rights for this thing? It's look at this story, First Blood, which is different than the movie, obviously. And he said, okay, I guess we'll keep those, fine. And then, of course, it turns into this big thing, which is very good that he did that. And now they've kind of closed some of these loopholes over the years for authors that at least early in the process, if you're a new author, they've closed a lot of these loopholes that were very lucrative for authors in the past. But I find the process, I'm always learning, and I love every part of this process, to include working on some of on the scripts for my series on Amazon. I thought it was I learned so much. But speaking of that, also the Cuban Affair. The Cuban Affair has some interest out there. I think you actually read a script for it. I did.
It had left a lot to be desired.
Yeah, you didn't like it.
It was awful, actually. And Hollywood buys something, as you know, and they buy it for a reason, but then they forgot why they bought it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Change everything except maybe the name of the. But what I do get in my contracts, Jack, is the name of the movie has to be the name of the book, because there's been so many where the book has been, hugely successful. Like I'm trying to think, like Red Dragon. That was Thomas Harrison made into a movie called The Manhunter. And then they realized they'd made a mistake, so they remade it, and then they made a movie called Red Dragon. But just easy to let them, not give them the option of having their brainstorming sessions and deciding to change the name of Gold Coast or the Charm School or whatever to something else. Then there's no identification with the book, and you're not going to sell a lot of books. So I get that in my contract.
That's smart.
But hard to work with these people, and you're probably having better luck than I am. Maybe I don't really want to work with Hollywood anymore. I used to go out twice a year with my agent, and it was kind of fun in a way. You go to breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but every time we got back on the plane coming home to New York, we'd say, "We need a bath. We need a bath."
No, I understand. It's very smart of you to have that in your contract. You can definitely make that happen. But me as a new author, optioning my first book for film and television before I'd sold one copy, I couldn't. They could do anything they want with it. And then luckily it's Antoine Fuqua and it's Chris Pratt. Now these people that I'm friends with that all are kind of the ownership, the brain trust of this as far as Hollywood goes. So we're keeping, it was the same name as the book, which was extremely helpful. And I have my eye on the clock because I know you are on book tour, and I saw your book tour schedule, which is on your website. People can go and check it out there. And that'll be in the show notes to this episode. Your book tours are extremely busy. Oh my goodness. You are still out there.
It's the post-COVID thing, a lot of people didn't tour obviously during COVID. And, I'm ambivalent about tours. I don't know about you, but they could be interesting. It's good to meet the fans. That's the nice part of it. You're in a bookstore at 7, 8 o'clock at night, and when you're giving a talk and you're signing books, and it's you get kind of enthused, and even after 23 books, and you don't want to be jaded. It is fun, It's just I think it's the airports that not defeat me. If it
Yes.
wasn't for the airports, I'd love to be in all these cities and do the tour. And it's always been a kind of energizing thing for me. And it's interesting to see what people say about your book and the kind of questions they ask. But for a while there, I was thinking of not touring, but they asked, and I said, okay. I mean, this is my last tour. The last 15, by the way, have been the
Exactly.
last.
I was going to guess that was the case. I love them because I can, when we're shaking hands with those people, the readership, the readers and the fans, it's my chance to say thank you in person
Right.
for being allowed to do what I love, which is right, to do what I wanted to do my whole life, which is right. And they're the reason that I can do it. So that's why I really enjoy those tours. But in the couple minutes we have left, if you were to, looking back, if you were to give your 1975, 76, 78, 80-year-old, or not year old, time frame year self back in those early days, what advice would you give yourself looking back? Was there something that you would wish you had known, or that you would tell your younger self in, let's say, 1980, 81?
You mean in terms of
Advice,
writing
advice about writing,
or
personally,
women or
professionally. Yeah, what would you tell
uh,
yourself?
I think I was kind of maybe a fast learner. I figured out the business because I kind of live in New York and I knew people in the business, but I realized that there is a difference in the quality of publishers, the quality of agents. There's a business end to this. I mean, to focus it, there's a business end to this. And it's not about the money. It's about, as you know, getting people to read your book. And when they read your book because they bought it, then of course you will make 50% royalties, whatever they're giving these days. But once you get the business end of it down, that if it's done right with advertising, promotion, you can, and the marketing of it and the cover, everything from
Mhm.
that, then you're going to expand your readership. And you have great books. A lot of writers we know have good books that sell almost nothing. There was the wrong publisher, they have the wrong agent. There's no advertising budget, and some good stuff gets lost that shouldn't get lost because it just wasn't handled correctly.
Right.
And I was I had a little bit of a business background, so I brought a little bit of that to the writing game. But a lot of writers are very autistic, and they don't
Mhm.
see that it's like everything else is a business.
Interesting. Yep. Yep. No,
A lot
that
of
became quite apparent in the lead up to publication of my first book. I realized that, and realized
right,
that I'd have to take advantage of these social media, podcasts, these things that weren't available if you were writing back in 1980 or 1985. So I looked at it like the battle space. How do you capitalize on momentum? How do you look for gaps in the enemy's defenses? And how do you adapt faster than your enemy, or maybe if there's competition, whatever it might be. So I looked at it like the battle space. And in the couple minutes we have left, The Maze. So it's going to be out right now when people hear this. And this one was a little different and I haven't read it yet, obviously, because it comes out tomorrow. So I can't wait to read it. But you're solving an actual real case, a mystery.
yeah. Well, I didn't solve it. I thought maybe I would. When you research a book, you think what it's based on. This is based on the Gilgo Beach murders. The Gilgo Beach is a beach here on Long Island where I live, and it's on Fire Island, and it's near the Hamptons. And um, this is a case that's now 11 years old. There were 10 prostitutes found over a period of some months, hidden. They're dead, hidden in the bramble where nobody usually goes because it's all thorns and whatever. So somebody figured this is a great dumping ground, but
Mm.
and who it was, the mafia, it was a single serial killer. We don't know. But the case became national because there's been, I think, 2 documentaries made on it and a few books, nonfiction, written about it. So it's like everything else, you kind of live with it. I live on Long Island, and every once in a while this case would pop up again, and very frustrating to the county homicide people who not used to handling a case of this magnitude. Maybe there was no forensic evidence. So at some point I said, this may be the basis of a novel, but it's always tricky when you're fictionalizing something that really happened. But I decided to let me give it a try. I was just, as much as we all want this case solved because 10 women have been murdered, I didn't want it solved before I finished the book and it came out, because that would have kind of messed the whole thing up. And that was always with a novel, when you're trying to chase headlines or follow real events, you always get that problem because it takes long to write the novel, then publisher will hold it for 6 months and the whole world can change, like the Cold War could be over and that type of thing. These are not magazines, these are books, and they got to kind of be timeless. And but I found it was interesting. I spoke to a lot of police, especially retired. They're willing to talk more than active duty, and it's a frustrating case. I mean, 10 women were murdered at different times within some months of each other, all dumped in the same area, and the police are still clueless 11 years later. And somebody knows what happened. Even if there's no forensic evidence, somebody knows what happened, not just the one person, not just but other people around him. And so there is information out there that I think the case will be solved through a witness more than somebody willing to talk rather than forensic evidence. So, but it's an interesting. I think I did a decent job of fictionalizing it in the book.
And no surprises. Don't give any spoilers here. But do you have a personal theory on the killings? And did that make it into the book, or do you have a separate personal opinion now that some time has passed?
At first there was some thought that there was corruption at the highest level. This had to do with the Suffolk County police, including the police chief, and that the county DA might have known more than he was saying. Some things didn't make sense. When the FBI came in on the case, because it became a big case, the local police chief kind of stonewalled the FBI. They didn't really want him in there. That aroused some suspicion. My thinking now, I thought it might have been mafia, but I think it was a single serial killer. A lot of people think it was somebody maybe kind of high profile, because there is Fire Island there in the Hamptons. This is what people would love to speculate, to some high profile billionaire from the Hamptons, who we all hate anyway because he's a billionaire and he's from the Hamptons. Excuse me, was a serial killer. I think it was one person, because it seems like everyone was strangled and they were all dumped in the same area. So that's my theory, but we'll find out when they finally catch that guy.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to read it. We're at an hour, and I know you have things to do, and you're on book tour, and it's very busy. So encourage everybody, get the maze, get it this week. And thank you so much for spending this time. I cannot tell you what an honor it has been for me to be able to talk to you. So thank you for the inspiration through all these books. And like I said, I wouldn't be the author I am today without you. So thank you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you, and good luck with the writing. You're a great writer, and you're a great interviewer, by the way.
Thank you so much. I'll let you get after it, and I'm looking forward to the next ones after the maze. So take care, and hopefully I'll see you in person soon.
That'd be great. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you to Navy Federal, presenting sponsor of the Danger Close podcast. I've been a member since 1996, since my first couple months in the military. Thank you guys for being on the journey with me. Navy Federal Credit Union is helping their members save when they purchase new homes. They have loan options and resources to make sure you get a great deal. Now, Navy Federal will contribute $1,000 as a lender credit towards closing costs on your new home. Members also save on their monthly payments, since there is no requirement for private mortgage insurance. Plus, Navy Federal offers low rates and fees, so you can save even more. Navy Federal mortgage experts can help you choose the best option for you, making the home loan process a smooth experience. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Our members are the mission. Insured by NCUA, Equal Housing Lender. Qualifying members with purchase mortgage applications after 9/16/22 may receive up to $1,000 towards actual closing costs applied at closing, with no cash back, and subject to loan program maximum contribution limits. Terms subject to change. Ask your loan officer for details. Navy Federal. Thank you so much to 6 Hour for jumping right on board out of the gate to make this podcast possible. Obviously, I am a huge SIG fan, having carried the P226 on every deployment downrange in the SEAL teams. But SIG was a supporter. They were friends well before I was a New York Times bestselling author, well before I even had an Instagram account or any social media presence whatsoever. So thank you guys all so much. Ron, Tom, Jason, everybody at SIG who gets up every day and continues to crush it and lead the way. SIG is always adapting. They're always at the forefront, whether it is firearms for citizens, whether it's firearms for our military, ammo, suppressors, optics, training, fire control units. They are doing it all, and they are always pushing that envelope and trying to do it better each and every day through innovation and adaptation. They crush. So thank you so much for that friendship and support. It will never be forgotten. I want to thank my friends at Black Rifle Coffee for sponsoring the Danger Close podcast. I've been a huge fan for the longest time. Drink Black Rifle Coffee every day. And if you keep your eyes peeled, you will notice that perhaps Chris Pratt is wearing a Black Rifle Coffee t-shirt, not unsimilar to this one, in the Amazon series adaptation of The Terminal List. Now you can go to blackriflecoffee.com/dangerclose and use code DangerClose20 at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. Black Rifle Coffee, America's coffee. Keep crushing. Welcome to the gear highlight portion of the Danger Close podcast. First off, badass workbenches. Awesome right here. This thing is solid, badass-workbench.com. Awesome. Thank you. And Mountain Ops, loving this shirt. Thank you so much for sending it. Awesome. Mountain Ops, just right down the road here in Utah. And look at this. True Precision sent me this SIG. And this thing, True Precision, you might remember James Reese used them in my fourth novel, in The Devil's Hand. And look at that. Boom. SIG. Thank you. This is a P320 right here. And True Precision, and that is true-precision.com. And I love the 365 that they made for me a couple years back. And this one right here is the 320. So, I mean, this thing is so nice. Look at that. Ready for the suppressor on there. Got a Trijicon red dot sight on there. And look at, I don't know if you can tell. Can you see that right there? They put cross tomahawks right there. Awesome. So True Precision, thank you. Both the 365 and this P320 are just awesome. You guys crushed it. So thank you so much. All right. Ooh, look at this. And right here, Wood Cabin Candle Company. Look at this. This is a small business, family owned and operated. And I've had a few of their candles over the years that have been burning in the house. They sent me a very nice card with stickers right here. Can never have too many pens. And here they are. So right there, woodcabincandlecompany.com. And they have a bunch of different fragrances and all that, but very cool. And look at the packaging. Nice work, guys. Really appreciate it. And check them out for sure. All right, let's see. Oh, look at this. So this is an 80 series Land Cruiser right here. And on Instagram, Stevie, that's Stevie 4Leaf, Leaf. He made this for me. See that right there? Oh yeah, cross tomahawks right there. Look at that detail, says Jack Carr right there. So 80 series, he knows I have an 80 series that I love. And this thing is sweet. So Stevie, thank you for the thoughtful gift. It is sincerely appreciated. Very cool. And look at this. Montana Knife Company. MontanaKnifeCompany.com. And look what they did here. Look at this. This knife roll. See that right there? Oh, this is awesome. And they have a new line of kitchen knives out. And I saw somebody open one of these on Instagram, and I was hoping that one would show up at my mail drop. And look at that. Sure enough, one did. And look at these things. These are just awesome. So Josh Smith up there at Montana Knife Company. Look at that right there. Whew. We'll be using these on Thanksgiving And yeah, just love what he's doing up there. You've seen me talk about some of his blades before. And oh, look at that. Oh, yeah. Nice. Oh, that feels good right there. And then this one right here. So check them out, MontanaKnifeCompany.com, and follow them on the Instagram as well. Very cool. So thank you guys. Really appreciate you thinking of me. That is awesome. And this roll is just epic. So cool. All right, put that over here. Man, 60th anniversary of James Bond hitting theaters with Dr. No back in 1962. And James Bond store, so I couldn't help myself. I got a whole collection of James Bond coffee mugs now. So that's .007store.com. Ooh, look at that. So this one is from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, George Lazenby. Also a very cool documentary on Hulu called Becoming James Bond. Very cool. So On Her Majesty's Secret Service, they have them for not all of the movies, but for most all of the movies. Oh, jumping back to that Montana Knife Company, look what else was in there. Little Tacticalories. Oh, yeah. So Tacticalories, very cool. And this one is, it's a collaboration with Montana Knife Company. So this is their bighorn. Very cool right there. And look at this. This is awesome. So Thomas, I don't want to mispronounce the last name, Fluharty. And you can go to website, Thomas, Fluharty.com to check out his artwork. And very nice card here. You can follow him on Instagram, link from that website. And I'm not sure if you can see this or not, but he made this really cool drawing. Look at that. Does that look like me? Pretty close. Very cool. So very distinctive artwork. Does a lot of cool stuff with cowboys and with superheroes, and was honored that he did a little portrait of me there. And look at that little book. That is artwork right there. So thank you so much for sending me once again, ThomasFluharty.com. Very cool. And look at this. Oh, damn. I'm gonna move these knives out of the way. Little Horse Soldier Bourbon right there. And on the podcast, Scotty Neal and Mark Nooch were on the podcast, but some of the first guys into Afghanistan after 9/11. And when they got out of the military, they started this right here, Horse Soldier Bourbon. Can you see that? Ooh, that is pretty cool. Amazing. Almost makes me not want to drink it. It looks so cool, but I will. So Horse Soldier Bourbon, check them out. And they are at horsesoldierbourbon.com. All right. That is it for today. Thanks so much. Take care out there. Thank you for tuning in to the Danger Close podcast, an Ironclad original presented by Navy Federal Credit Union. To find out more about Nelson DeMille, visit his website, nelsondemille.net, and that is DEMILLE.net. And remember that The Maze is out right now, so be sure and go pick that up. The title drop video for my upcoming novel, Only the Dead, is out right now. You can go to my social channels at Jack Carr USA or my YouTube channel to check that out. Officialjackcarr.com, that is the website. You can sign up for the newsletter there, and you can click on Shop for the merch. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. And until the next time, take care out there, stay safe, be strong, keep fighting.